You look out your kitchen window on a quiet Tuesday morning. The coffee in your mug is perfectly still. Then a low-frequency vibration ripples through the floorboards and rattles the glass. You expect the usual heavy truck or a passing construction crew, but the real answer is far stranger than a mechanical disturbance. What if the ancient world suddenly demanded its territory back? You instinctively look toward the street expecting a cinematic nightmare of panic and running crowds. You imagine giant jaws shattering steel skyscrapers and crushing vehicles beneath massive scaly feet. But the true threat of a prehistoric resurrection has nothing to do with Hollywood destruction. It belongs to a quiet, invisible war over the very resources that keep you alive every single day. How would your modern mind cope with a planet that no longer belongs to you? You believe your concrete cities have isolated you from nature. You rely on global supply chains to fill your local grocery stores. A sudden return of the world's most successful apex predators would instantly shatter this fragile illusion. The immediate crisis would not be a localized monster movie in a major metropolitan area. Instead, it would be a total ecological rewrite occurring across every continent simultaneously. Can a modern agricultural system survive when the ghosts of the Mesozoic era start looking for breakfast? You often picture dinosaurs as slow, sluggish lizards waiting around in ancient swamps. You assume they would easily freeze in your modern winters or overheat in your summers. But pioneering research by paleontologist Dr. Stephen Brusatte reveals a completely different reality. His extensive analysis of bone microstructures proves that these creatures possessed incredibly high metabolic rates. They grew with astonishing speed, burning energy like high-performance biological machines. Why does their internal temperature matter to your survival today? It matters because a high metabolism requires an unimaginable quantity of daily fuel. A single herd of breeding sauropods would not just graze on a few trees in a national park. They would strip an entire state forest bare of all foliage within a matter of days. Your carefully managed timberlands and protected green spaces would vanish into giant digestive tracts. Could your modern environmental infrastructure withstand thousands of multi-ton herbivores clear-cutting the landscape? You might think your agricultural fields are safe behind high fences and highway networks. You forget that a creature weighing 40 tons does not notice a chain-link barrier. An army of hungry triceratops would march directly through the American Corn Belt without slowing down. They would obliterate thousands of acres of food supplies in a single afternoon of routine feeding. The global food distribution network would instantly collapse under the weight of this massive competition. Prices would skyrocket as regional farms face unprecedented, unstoppable devastation. How would you feed your family when the world's largest vegetarians claim your crops as their own? You must also consider the meat eaters that followed these giant herds across the continents. You think a fence or a brick wall would keep you safe from a large theropod. Dr. Thomas Holtz, a leading authority on predatory dinosaur mechanics, has detailed their terrifying efficiency. His research shows that large carnivores like Tyrannosaurus rex were not clumsy scavengers. They were highly adapted, long-distance pursuit predators with bone-crushing bite forces that exceed any modern animal. They would view your suburban neighborhoods as highly concentrated feeding grounds filled with easy prey. Your domesticated livestock, your horses and your cattle would be eradicated within weeks. The apex predators of today, like lions and grizzly bears, would be pushed to total extinction. Where would you hide when the local woods are occupied by a creature that hunts by sensing your heartbeat? You would quickly realize that your modern weapons are less effective than you hope. You assume a standard police firearm or a hunting rifle would stop a charging predator. The dense musculature and thick skin of a prehistoric carnivore would absorb ordinary ballistic impacts. Military intervention would become a permanent necessity rather than a temporary emergency response. Your daily life would transform into a militarized siege where simple outdoor travel requires armored convoys. The freedom to walk through a park or hike a trail would disappear forever. Are you prepared to live in a world where stepping outside your front door requires military clearance? You might assume that human ingenuity would simply find a way to eliminate them all. You believe technology always triumphs over biological muscle and bone, but wiping out these creatures would trigger an even greater disaster for your planet. Ecologist Dr. William Ripple has documented the profound impact of apex predators on modern ecosystems. His studies on trophic cascades show that removing top predators causes an immediate, catastrophic collapse of biodiversity. If you use heavy weapons to destroy the returning dinosaurs, you destroy the fragile balance of nature. The sudden removal of these massive organisms would cause explosion waves of smaller pests and diseases. The rivers would change their courses as vegetation disappears and soil erosion accelerates wildly. How do you maintain a stable civilization when the very earth beneath your feet is unraveling? You would see the oceans transform just as violently as the land masses. You look at the sea as a vast, open space of safety and commerce. The return of giant marine reptiles like mosasaurs and plesiosaurs would paralyze global shipping lanes. International trade relies entirely on giant cargo vessels crossing predictable maritime routes. A regular population of aggressive oceanic predators would disrupt these critical supply paths. They would attack smaller fishing vessels and disrupt the global seafood industry completely. The oceans would become mysterious, terrifying zones of danger just as they were millions of years ago. Would your modern economy survive if the oceans became completely impassable for commercial ships? You must look inside your own mind to understand the true psychological toll. You believe your intelligence places you above the raw animal instinct of fear? Your ancestors spent over 150 million years living under the literal shadow of dinosaurs. They were small, nocturnal mammals that survived by hiding in deep burrows and avoiding the daylight. Your brain still retains the ancient neural architecture designed to cope with that constant, overwhelming threat. The amygdala inside your temporal lobe would shift into a state of permanent, chronic hyperactivity. You would experience an epidemic of psychological stress that no modern medicine could properly cure. The simple sound of a heavy footstep or a distant roar would trigger an immediate adrenaline flood. Can your mind function normally when your genetic memory tells you that you are nothing but prey? You would notice your sleeping patterns changing to mimic those ancient mammalian ancestors. You would find yourself waking up at the slightest sound during the dark hours. The nighttime would no longer represent a period of peaceful rest and recovery. Instead, it would become a tactical window of survival where vigilance is your only protection. Human productivity would plummet as exhaustion takes over entire populations across the globe. The continuous strain on your nervous system would lead to widespread physical and mental breakdown. How long could your society last when every citizen is too terrified to sleep deeply? You might expect the ultimate battle to be fought with missiles and heavy artillery. You imagine grand historical standoffs between human technology and prehistoric biology. But the most devastating conflict would actually occur on a microscopic scale that you cannot see. Dinosaurs would arrive carrying ancient pathogens, viruses, and parasites that vanished from the Earth eons ago. Your modern immune system has absolutely no historical memory of these microscopic threats. A single breath of air near a nesting site could unleash a global pandemic of prehistoric disease. Medical science would be completely helpless as these ancient organisms bypass all known treatments. What happens when the air itself becomes a vector for an extinction-level infection? You must realize that this biological warfare would flow in both directions as well. The returning creatures would have no immunity to modern bacteria and common avian flus. Thousands of massive animals would die of simple infections within their first few weeks on Earth. Their enormous decaying bodies would litter the landscapes of your cities and countryside. The resulting sanitary crisis would overwhelm emergency services and contaminate local water supplies. Rotting carcasses weighing 20 tons would breed billions of modern disease-carrying insects. The secondary plague caused by their deaths would be far more lethal than their live attacks. How do you clean up a continent covered in the decomposing remains of a biological mismatch? You must also consider the radical shift in the global climate and atmosphere. The Mesozoic era possessed significantly higher levels of carbon dioxide and oxygen than your world today. The returning dinosaurs would find your modern air thin, depleted, and difficult to breathe efficiently. They would constantly suffer from respiratory distress, panting heavily as they seek out rich oxygen sources. To survive, their massive digestive systems would release unprecedented amounts of methane gas into the sky. The sheer volume of greenhouse gases produced by millions of resurrected giants would accelerate climate shifts. You would witness sudden violent weather patterns disrupting your cities with terrifying regularity. The atmosphere you take for granted would alter its chemical composition before your very eyes. Could your infrastructure endure a climate transformed by the metabolic waste of the past? You would watch your architectural philosophies transform out of sheer necessity. The glass skyscrapers and open urban plazas of the modern era would become completely obsolete. Cities would be forced to construct massive vertical barriers and deep subterranean transit networks. Your daily commute would no longer happen on open highways under the morning sun. Instead, you would travel through heavily fortified concrete tunnels bored deep into the bedrock. The sky would become a place of constant anxiety as giant pterosaurs circle above the buildings. They would snatch unsuspecting citizens from rooftops and open-air balconies without warning. Your homes would turn into windowless bunkers built to withstand immense blunt force impacts. Would you still call yourself the master of the world while living like a rodent beneath the ground? You believe that human dominance over the earth is a permanent guaranteed fact of nature. You view the history of life as a straight line leading directly to your technological perfection. The sudden presence of an older, more durable evolutionary design would destroy that comforting myth. Dinosaurs ruled this planet for over 160 million years without a single machine. Human civilization has existed for only a tiny fraction of that immense geological epoch. They are the true tenants of this planet, and you are merely a recent, fragile tenant. Their return would force you to confront your own profound insignificance in the cosmic timeline. You would realize that your laws, your currencies, and your borders mean absolutely nothing to the Earth. Are you ready to admit that your entire history is just a brief intermission between their reigns? You would look at the remaining natural spaces with a newfound sense of humility and terror. The wilderness would no longer be a place for weekend recreation and peaceful introspection. It would return to its original status as a dark, untamed realm where humans do not belong. Your species would be forced into a tight, defensive posture, huddling together for survival. The political divisions that fracture your modern world would instantly seem absurd and trivial. You would find common ground with your fellow humans only when facing an absolute external pressure. The ultimate irony of their return is that it might finally force you to unite as a single species. But that unity would come at the cost of your pride, your comfort, and your global dominance. Are you willing to pay that price to ensure the continuation of the human story? You would look at your children and wonder what kind of future they will inherit. They would grow up learning the tracks of predators instead of the names of digital trends. Their education would focus on survival strategies, camouflage techniques, and acoustic monitoring. The stories of a time when humans walked freely through open forests would sound like fairy tales. They would view your current lifestyle as an ancient, legendary golden age of impossible freedom. The psychological transition would be complete as the new generation accepts its place in the food chain. They would not see the dinosaurs as monsters, but as a natural, permanent part of the landscape. They would learn to navigate the dangers with a quiet, respectful caution that you currently lack. Can you accept a future where your descendants look at the sky with fear instead of wonder? You will eventually turn away from the window and look down at your cold coffee. The brief tremor will pass, leaving only the quiet hum of your modern refrigerator. You will smile at the absurdity of your own brief, wild imagination. You will grab your keys, open your front door, and step out into the familiar morning air. But as you look down at the solid pavement beneath your feet, a tiny doubt will remain. You will wonder how long the thin crust of human civilization can truly hold back the past. Tonight, when you lie in bed, your ears will strain to catch every distant vibration in the dark. You will realize that the ancient world is never truly gone from your genetic memory. Tomorrow morning, you will likely look out your kitchen window again,